Direct from Fort Meade, Maryland, this is DINFOS Live.
Welcome back to another episode of DINFOS Live. Don't let the mustache fool you, folks. I'm still Major David J. Murphy, an instructor at the Defense Information School. Well, I wanted to say that we were joining you all live from Joint Base Anacostia Bolling for our first ever roadshow. Unfortunately, the weather has not cooperated with us, so instead, we're doing our show here in the studio. Regardless of where we do the show, though, I'm happy to have with me two members of the JBAB Public Affairs team to talk with me about their amazing mission at the base and how they've utilized DINFOS training to affect communications strategy for their commander. Please welcome U.S. Air Force Captain Callie Gradishar and Mr. Greg Hapgood.
Thanks for having us.
Great, glad to be here. Thank you for being here.
Great to be here, thank you.
Great to see you again, Greg.
You too.
All right, well, thank you again so much for being with us. I know we had a lot of stuff planned, so I'm so happy that you're able to adjust on short notice. We really appreciate it. And we really appreciate you for tuning into our program. If you're watching live right now, your questions and comments will be seen by our social media moderator, Staff Sergeant Kelly Timney. Welcome to the show, Staff Sergeant.
Thank you, sir.
I heard you recently just got a new camera. Tell me about that.
I did. I purchased a mirrorless camera so I could keep up and practice my craft as I'm doing more of a more administrative task.
Nice. Yeah, mirrorless is kind of the way to go nowadays. It's the way of the future, so good on you for that. Well, if you have any questions for our guests, don't hesitate to ask them. Okay, guests, are you ready to chat?
Absolutely.
Let's do it.
Perfect. Well, let's start out with introductions. Why don't you go ahead and tell me a little bit about your military experience and your PA experience? Captain Gradishar?
Yeah, I've been in Air Force Public Affairs now for 16 years. I started out enlisted and transitioned over about 4.5 years ago. And right now I am the Chief of Public Affairs at Joint Base Anacostia Bolling. And yeah, it's been a great experience so far.
Yeah, I'm Greg Hapgood. I'm the Section Chief for Mission Partner Support at Joint Base Anacostia Bolling, 11th Wing Public Affairs. I spent 32 years in the Army National Guard and Army, 26 of that in Public Affairs before I joined the JBAB team in March of 2021.
That's awesome. Well, we're great to have you here. I know you have experienced some really unique situations at JBAB, the first of which I'm understanding is a service lead transfer. Can you talk to me a little bit about what that is and how you approach that from a public affairs communication perspective?
Yes, so in 2010, Joint Base Anacostia Bolling became a joint base, and at the time it fell under the authority of the Navy. And for the first time in Department of Defense history, they transitioned over to a new service authority, service lead authority in 2020. And so now it's under the authority of the Air Force, and it's been a very interesting ride, and not only standing up the public affairs office there, but also supporting the wing as the wing stands up as well.
Wow. What kind of challenges come from not only the service lead transfer, but standing up a new PA office?
So the first thing that comes to mind is resources, of course. And so just to give an idea of what it was that we went through, we really started from scratch. So we didn't have manning, we didn't have equipment, we didn't have a budget, and so we worked through the process really from the ground up, putting processes in place, putting programs in place, and really that all had to do with getting the people in place first to be able to do that. And so I've just been really fortunate to have the people coming on the team as they've had, maybe not as quick as I would have hoped, but it's definitely been an interesting, very challenging ride.
Wow, absolutely. Talk to me a little bit about the higher headquarters role in a situation like this. What role did they play, and how did they sort of assist you in this process?
I'm really grateful that in the beginning I was on the planning team with the Air Force District of Washington, and I had an incredible teammate, Joy Josephson, who really built the foundation and brought me in and really helped prepare me to be the Chief of Public Affairs. And so that was incredible. We built the communication, well, she largely built the communication plan. I supported on the back end and then attempted to bring it through execution until COVID forced a lot of changes on that. So we had that support from AFDW in the beginning. Once it transitioned over, we had the support from Naval District Washington to do our social media platforms. At the time, it was just me, a team of one. And so it was great to have the support from Chatney Auger at NDW to do that social media work. And then now I think we're in the best place possible for a higher headquarters support with AFDW, working with the Military District of Washington, NDW, and those higher headquarters as well.
great. That's great. You know, setting up a brand new public affairs office is an amazing experience and something that very few of us actually get to have as public affairs professionals in our career. So tell me a little bit more about that experience and kind of how that played into your overall experience as a PA.
So I say grateful again, but again, I'm grateful that I had the experience that I did beforehand. You know, leaders who trusted in me to work outside of my comfort zone, and for people who guided me along the way to be able to come into this position and to keep some semblance of my sanity, while also bringing in teammates to help build programs and processes along the way.
Yeah, and you know, it wasn't magic. It was a ton of hard work that came into play. The pre-planning, as Captain Gradishar said, was absolutely key. But then really it was for her to start to execute that plan regardless what challenges came in the way, and she did a fantastic job.
That's great. Now, Mr. Hapgood, you came in about a year into the process. What was it like for you, and how did you assist Captain Gradishar?
So I came in March of 2021, and you know, I was from a culture of public affairs shops that were already in place, that were already fully developed. When I got to Joint Base Anacostia Bolling in March of 2021, you know, everything was on the fly, if you will, because, you know, people weren't in place yet, a few were in place, and then we got a few more. Equipment hadn't arrived, or only some had arrived, and then we got more. But every day it was rewarding to see just a little bit of progress made. And, you know, that was continuous because people just really dedicated themselves to make things better a little bit each day.
Absolutely.
And I have to add, too, that it was really remarkable to see each person who came in. You know, there was that brief sigh of relief, like, okay, one more person to help do this job. But then, you know, there was more and more to do. The part of that was really remarkable is seeing that everyone who came in, there were things that they had never done before. They just did not have the experience. And it was so great to see the attitudes that came with that from every teammate who came along the way to step up and say, I've never done that, but let's figure it out.
There you go. That's great to hear. You know, you've both been through DINFOS courses. Yourself, you've been through enlisted and officer courses, PAQC on the officer side, and you went through PAX-Q, the revision of PAQC. Talk to me about how that DINFOS training prepared you for what you had to do at JBAB.
So I think a couple things jump out right away from particularly my experience with PAX-Q is that you know, you really took a lot of time to work on communications plans and to develop those communication plans to fit your particular need, but also to make it worthwhile, whether it was the tactics that you used, or, you know, applying metrics to it to make it more effective. But, you know, first of all, the research end of it, because the research is the anchor for everything you do in a comm plan. And so I think that jumped out right away, is that we applied some of those same exact tools in our shop on Joint Base Anacostia Bolling, and continue to do so every day. I think the secondary thing I took away was the great networking and the relationships we built with our peers across the PAX-Q course. And those contacts we use often. They contact us, we contact them, but I think everybody's got a different experience and different skill set that can bring some clarity to what you're doing and really help you.
That's great. That's great. When establishing this new PA office, though, how important was it for you to make aware to your leadership, to your commander, what your PA capabilities were?
So I think in any situation that you go into, having your leaders aware of what you're doing, having your leaders advocate for you as public affairs, I think many of us know that you know, we can go into a situation, we can be confronted with leadership that is just not aware of what strategic communication, what public affairs brings to the table. And so we were really fortunate early on with our first commander and also with our current commanders. We've done a change of command since that, you know, they may not have had all the answers, or they may not have like quite understood everything that we were bringing to the table, but they were very open. They listened. And our first commander early on, he was very adamant about bringing me into the room as we were talking about the planning, the development with all of the group commanders, all of the squadron commanders. So that way they knew me, they knew my ability, and they could have some level of confidence in that. And also they knew what public affairs could do for them as we were making this huge move for our wing and for our installation.
Oh, that's great. Were there any remnants of Bolling Air Force Base or anything you took from the Navy prior PA command that were able to help you as you set up this new PA office?
So to give a timeline, so in 2010 it was Bolling Air Force Base transferring to Joint Base Anacostia Bolling, and so the remnants of what that public affairs office was, we really didn't have much, as it was 10 years under the Navy, and public affairs operates, it seems, just very different. And then as far as what we got from the Navy before, just a matter of timing, there was an exceptional public affairs civilian there, Abby Meyer, who was holding down the fort on the Navy side for some time by herself. And so, and then just by nature of timing again, she wasn't there when we did the transition to Air Force. But so there wasn't much, but I will say, it was very interesting to see as we were transitioning the processes or the programs for public affairs, or growing the processes for programs in public affairs, everything else was transitioning too. So, so what may have applied for Navy public affairs to Navy processes, everything on the installation was really changing.
Wow. I'm hearing we have a question from social media. So Staff Sergeant Timney, hit us.
Mr. Thomas Yates asks, were there any unexpected challenges that you couldn't have planned for?
That is a solid yes. There were quite a few, actually. I think when you go into anything, you have this plan and you think it's going to go a particular way, but there are always going to be these unexpected things that just pop up. I mean, the challenges that we had from getting space, getting furniture, I mean, some of the very most basic things we were really challenged in getting, and today we're still challenged in accomplishing some of those things. Getting people in. So I talked about manning and resources up front. Of course, I mean, everybody out there knows that COVID threw a huge wrench into the way that we communicated. So there was that as well. We couldn't have anticipated that. And so the answer is yes, there were many things. The important thing about that, though, is that I think once we had a team, the team was flexible. They were willing to do what needed to be done, and we stuck together. We figured it out.
That's great. Great to hear that. Unlike most bases that are Air Force led, you don't have a flying mission. Can you talk to me about what your operational mission is and how you support it with PA communications?
Yeah, so at Anacostia Bolling, we have some very unique missions operationally. The Air Force Band is located there. The Air Force Honor Guard is located there. We have Air Force chaplains that support the Arlington National Cemetery chaplaincy mission. We also have a worldwide mission where we pick up and provide support to about 30,000 airmen all over the globe that don't otherwise fit into a specific category. And then also we have the Air Force Memorial that we provide public affairs support for as well. So those are our flying missions, as you will, but very unique in the Air Force.
And while you've had some unique sort of experiences, you've also had some more experiences that I think many of our public affairs audience can relate to. So for instance, you had to prepare a SME for a television news program. Can you tell me a little about that experience?
Yeah, so that's something that sort of just fell into our lap. We had a family who had a very compelling story about their experiences on 9/11. And it started with the History Channel picking up the story. That was with her name was Lieutenant Bourne and retired General Bourne. And at the time, the mother was the squadron commander at Joint Base Anacostia Bolling, and the daughter, Lieutenant Hannah Bourne, she was just a 3-year-old child at the Pentagon, and she was in the CDC. And so it was this very compelling story of heritage, of tradition in serving for this family, and also of mission, where this mother had a responsibility to accomplish a mission while not knowing what was happening with her daughter at the CDC and the Pentagon after it had been hit. And so so we had this story the History Channel picked up on. It continued through national news, and it ended up on CNN with Jake Tapper. We prepared this subject matter expert, so the Bourne family, for a live interview on CNN. And we've had really a number of national interest items that have kind of popped up for us As Greg likes to remind us, anything in the National Capital Region can be local interest 1 second and then national interest the next, and we've certainly experienced that with a number of stories.
Yes, you do have that from the proximity of being so close to the National Capital Region. It's very easy for many different media agencies to get to where you are. And they can get to where you are in the event of a crisis as well, right? And you all went through and experienced a crisis during the past 2 years. So can you tell me about that crisis and how you worked through it?
Sure. We had an individual who had committed a crime in a local neighborhood and then decided that the next thing he should do is jump into a military base to find safety. It was a poor decision on that particular day. He did scale a fence and got injured scaling the fence. He was armed and came onto the base, and so became an armed intruder on our base. So it kind of went forward from there. I'm going to kind of let you take the piece of it, what happened next, Callie.
Sure. So, so just convenient timing. We just happened to train a couple of weeks prior, practicing our active shooter checklist, and so. So once we got news that this was occurring on our installation, we had an armed base intruder. We pulled the nearest like checklist and just started running it. And we had news that was coming to our installation gates. We had news that was calling. Number of media outlets that were very interested in this conflict that was happening right in the heart of Washington, D.C. And it was very I would say rewarding as a team to see a lot of this unfold and people taking action, taking responsibility, taking direction, and things working out very well. And it was also, I would say, an opportunity, looked at it as an opportunity to train while we were in the midst of this, this crisis as well. So, so Greg went out and met the media, but he brought along someone, another civilian who had no DoD experience at that time, one of our new hires. And so, so that really was our first moment where we practiced, well, it wasn't practice, where we executed crisis communication as a team while we're also trying to just develop ourselves as a team.
Yeah, and the byproduct of that event was we created relationships with media there that we hadn't, previously had any connectivity to, and just from that moment forward, our relationships really grew. And because of that, and they saw the way that we handled the media, we provided them with compelling storylines, took good care of them, that they came to us again and again and again in the future for other stories. So it paid dividends that we couldn't really see at that point in time.
And speaking of dividends, one of the things that we teach a lot and emphasize in the public affairs program at DINFOS is evaluation. So how did you evaluate your success in any of these public affairs tasks?
So we looked to the typical metrics as one would. So we looked at our Facebook metrics. We looked at the comments and how people responded just in our internal audience. But as Greg was mentioning, the building of relationships, that sort of, that was one of the ways that we evaluated our success there too, where you can't really put a number to that necessarily, but it was very clear that the way that we engaged the media in that environment, in that crisis, communication moment, that that we were truly building relationships in this. It's really a challenging media environment, and so so we looked to both sides, but really wanted to weigh the tangible also with those more intangibles of those relationships that we were able to build.
Yeah, we also did pretty thorough analysis from environmental scanning on the media that had picked up our stories and what they said about it. And you can't tell things from vanity metrics. You have to dig into those storylines and say, was this a plus, a minus, a neutral, what was it? And so that really kind of got us down that road about looking into those stories deeply to figure out, was this effective or ineffective.
I'm sure you both learned a lot when you were time at DINFOS. So can you tell me, what was the most effective thing you learned and most helpful for you as PAOs?
So Greg has already mentioned the communication planning, but I would also add too that I took a lot of documents. So after the class was over and we got all of our files and all of the trainings, I really took a lot of what I could from those DINFOS files and So I didn't have to recreate the wheel, so my team didn't have to recreate the wheel. A lot of that was in the media operations, and so we took the subject matter expert prep, we took the media analysis, communication planning, and those interview tactics. We took a lot of that and built that into our processes where we had none previously. And that was really useful, and especially for an environment like this, talking about crisis, but also for the national news that I spoke about, the numerous opportunities and that just kind of, fell into our laps. Great opportunities. So that was really useful, especially for those who, haven't had an opportunity yet to come through DINFOS, largely our civilian folks that we'll be sending through soon.
Absolutely. DINFOS covers a lot of material over the course and the time that we have with our students, but we can't cover everything, right? We can't cover every single permutation of anything that could potentially happen. Is there anything that you wish you'd been taught at the schoolhouse or that you had to learn on the job or through further training?
For me, the answer is no. So I know that you can't fit everything into a single course curriculum. And so I view that more as a foundation. And so what I got from DINFOS, that laid the foundation, and then what continued from there was additional training, opportunities, getting great leaders, getting me outside of my comfort zone, and then also having that same mentality for my people that they get this foundation from DINFOS, but it's my responsibility as a leader to send them for more, to train them, and that's something that we were very focused on from the very beginning. We will do Friday training, we will do that, we will prioritize it because it's so important. And so I think it's more, I don't wish there's anything that I learned from DINFOS that I didn't get. I got what I needed, I got the foundation, and it was really up to me to do more for myself and more for my team.
Yeah, some of those things you just have to fill in for yourself out in the world, getting experience. Like for instance, community engagement. Hard to teach that at DINFOS with all the other things you've got going on. But community engagement, especially the Joint Base in the heart of an inner city, is incredibly important to what it is we're doing with this mission to be good neighbors and to develop those relationships. So I think that's one thing that you might not get here at DINFOS, but you certainly can get out in the real world by your own experiences.
That's great. That's great. I'm hearing we're having another question from social media. So Staff Sergeant Timney, what do you got?
Crystal Colby asked, in a new PA office, when do you decide to adjust/focus resources to or from certain areas based on feedback and evaluation?
That's a great question. And it really ties into one of the most important pieces, not just as a leader, but just generally as a human, is having that self-awareness and also having that, prioritizing introspection. And so looking at, how are things going? How can we evaluate, or how can we, just assess what is in front of us? How are we operating? That's bringing the whole team in to get feedback. How do you think things are going? In the case of the base intruder, let's do an entire after action report with a hot wash and talk about how things are going. And then being willing to take risks. So, if you see that something isn't working in a particular section and you need to apply resources elsewhere, then you make the best decision that you can with the information that you have. If it doesn't work, then you find something you find something new to try, and you just continue to try to adjust to something better, something newer if you have to, or in some cases going back to the way that it was before.
I think it's also incredibly important to focus on the commander's lines of effort, that we ensure before we do whatever mission that we look at the lines of effort and say, are we fulfilling at least one of these lines of effort? And that really that lays out the roadmap for us with any project that we do. Are we doing what the commander wants us to do?
So in that case, exactly, yeah. So, for Air Force Public Affairs, we have that command information, media operations, community engagement, mission partner support. And in a lot of cases, at least I see on the Air Force side, we put a lot of, what do we say, eggs in a basket? A lot of our eggs in the basket of command information. And not to say that it isn't important, but what is it that your commander wants to achieve? And if it's that, if we want to communicate better with our internal and external audiences through that command information, then great. In our case, there was a lot of focus on that media operations and really a lot more on the community engagement side of things.
Wow, wow. You mentioned your Friday training. Can you tell me a little about that and any other training opportunities that you took advantage of to help make yourselves better PAOs overall?
Yeah, it's like I said, it was really a priority early on. I think a lot of us have been to those places where we have that training and it's scheduled, but something happens and things happen. But it was very important to us early on, especially with what we were walking into, that we needed to keep our eye on continuing to grow and develop ourselves. So what we've done, I think, it's worked out very well. We empower our youngest airmen to provide training just as much as we get it from the top. And we use the resources that we have, what people are interested in. One of the things that we have used too is DINFOS Pavilion. So when we look at things like social media, crisis communication, I mean, that's been a great tool to pull information from and share with the team on Fridays.
Yeah, we also take TDY opportunities for our younger airmen to make sure that they get that real world experience. Like for instance, this fall we have a couple airmen going to a tattoo in Germany, but we've also done defense POW, MIA accounting agency missions, and other types of things in other places in the world. So those TDYs, though, really help them develop those skills that they'll need out in the real world.
And then bring them back.
Then bring them back, that's right.
It's amazing. Maybe DINFOS Live could be part of your training curriculum going forward, huh? Just set it all up and everybody can watch it at the same time. But I hear we have another question. Staff Sergeant?
We do. Lieutenant Jason Barnes, he asks, how is it managing a public affairs office and performing normal functions of a public affairs office while also standing it up?
Can I go with a one-word answer and just say wild? Certainly very challenging, I would say. Yeah. I don't know what other services say, but the Air Force has this, we'll build the plane, or build the plane as we fly it. Not my favorite saying, but that's essentially what we've done. From a very early point, really from the beginning, we were expected to execute as a fully functional public affairs office. Part of that was managing expectations with our commander and then with us just on the team in general. But certainly very challenging. The biggest piece of that, though, I would say, is managing expectations. So what is it that we can accomplish with the people that we have and with the resources that we have?
And I think also having a strong employment plan that lays out in writing what it is we can and can't do with the capabilities that we currently have.
Mm-hmm. From your perspective, what do you think has been the biggest difference between serving as a PA officer on a joint base versus a single service base?
You know, I think a lot of it really comes down to terminology because, most bases today are more than just a single service. They have other entities that sit on that base. But for us, I mean, you come into work every day and you think about what you are. And you look across our base, we have all services represented and, approximately 70 mission partners. So it's very easy to get into a joint mindset when you're surrounded by all these other folks that do other things, other services, other uniforms. So I think it really comes down to, having a very open mind, learning what the other services find important, trying to understand their language, and really seek out opportunities to help tell their stories, amplify what it is they're doing, and learn, a little bit about each of these agencies so you can talk intelligently about them when you need to.
Yeah, from my personal experience, it's been having to switch between sometimes having an Army commander versus an Air Force commander versus a Navy commander, etc. But definitely having to understand and know all of the service regulations with regard to public affairs rules and policy. So that's been pretty interesting for me personally. But I want you to think about the last 24 months, look back over it, and tell me, what would you do differently if you were standing up a PA office today?
Yeah, so that's, I'll take that first. I was in it for the full 24 months, a little bit over 2 years actually now. And I would say a big piece of that, especially as I'm on my way out to my next assignment, a lot of reflecting going on. One of the things that I've hit on most as I'm reflecting is thinking about the way that I presented myself in building up this installation. I think that we can all relate to those times where we've had to sprint. It's an operation, an exercise, or we're deploying, and we know during that time frame we're going to have to move fast, and we're going to have to do things well, and we're going to have to be flexible, right? And that is a sprint. And so what I don't think that I did well early on is think of it as more of a marathon. And I also think that we, or at least the way that I came to the table with that, I think that affected the team too, which is challenging, and that's the internal pressure. Not to mention the external pressure too of always having to be an advocate for public affairs, training and teaching and educating our senior leaders on what it is that we do and what we bring to the table, and all of those external pressures of being able to execute public affairs every day. So that's what I think of when I think of the last 24 months, just managing expectations, setting a good pace, and viewing it as really a marathon. It's been a little over 2 years, and we're still building. And but I think that we're in a more manageable place, and certainly have more people, so it's nice too.
Yeah, totally agree with everything Captain Gradishar just said. The only thing I might add is that on the reflection piece is that we don't step back enough. We're so busy executing and focused on being operational tactically that we forget to step back a little bit and look at what we've done and try to say, is that effective? Is it ineffective? How could we do it better? How are we treating people? Are we being hard on people, or are we being easy on people? I mean, because again, this is going to go on for quite a while. So it's important that we are, using our resources correctly, and that includes people power. That people are employed well and they don't feel like they're wrung out, but they've got enough to do. So, I mean, you got to find that balance about getting them enough to do, but don't overload them too much that you burn them out. So I would totally agree with everything you just said.
Yeah, absolutely. No, wise words, wise words. And I don't want to say we're going viral, but we do have another question from social media.
We do. Staff Sergeant Dan Ellenbogen asks, what do you think of when you're turning over such a new shop to new staff? What do you have for them? What advice, what comes to mind?
I've actually had this conversation numerous times in the last couple of weeks, because a lot of the team just across the wing is, they're transitioning to the newer folks coming in. And so I would say just having some sort of perspective. For me, and what my expectations were and what I thought it was going to look like at the 2-year period, it doesn't look like that. A lot has changed. COVID happened. And so it's not what I thought that I was going to be turning over to my replacement. However, sharing that perspective and letting them know, hey, you're going to have these plans and there are these things that you're going to want to do. Some of them are going to work out really well. Some of them might die out very quickly. And there might be a lot of things there in the middle. So just it goes back to the expectation management too. As those new folks come on, hey, go, move forward. Yes, make it better than what it is that, that we made it as the initial team. But also, be kind to yourself that some things aren't going to work out, some things are, but in the end, you're going to leave it a lot better than when I handed it over.
Yeah, I think utter flexibility, because all the things you just said are true, and then also you're going to have opportunities come up that you never anticipated. And you have to figure out what's the value here to us. What's the so what? Is this valuable to us? If so, let's nail it. If not, we need to pass on that particular opportunity. So you have to really sort through that and somewhat quickly as these opportunities come up and go away so fast.
Yeah, and the great thing is that your replacement will have Mr. Hapgood as continuity.
Absolutely.
So
she is so lucky.
Indeed, indeed. Well, it's been an honor to have you on the program. Really pleasure to talk to you all about what's going on at your office. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we sign off?
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's been very interesting and rewarding for me to come on and have this new experience outside of my comfort zone. But mostly, I just hope that people have listened to this and they are able to take something from it that is useful. If you go on to stand up your own. I learned the term plank owner recently. Become a plank owner. Or if you go into something where you just see that there's a lot of room for growth and change. I hope that this has been helpful, and then just want to share some gratitude for the team that I have. I think that the JBAB team is in such a good place right now, and I'm so proud of the teammates that I have and how we've we've survived and thrived over the last 2 years.
Yeah, no, and along with that, thanks for the opportunity to kind of sit back and reflect on everything we've done. You're so busy executing that you don't really take a moment to take a breath and look at what you've done. And so thanks for that opportunity.
Hey, no problem. Happy to do that. Well, that's our show for this week, folks. Check out our show notes for any links that we discussed or any of the resources that we may have mentioned. And we'll, of course, be monitoring the chat for the next few days. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I'm sure our guests would be happy to jump on there and answer your questions for you. Also, if you'd rather hear DINFOS live instead of watch it on video, you can download the show as a podcast on your podcatcher of choice. Just download that podcatcher and search DINFOS Live. I want to again thank our guests for taking time out of their busy schedules and their day to be here with us. And I want to thank you for watching or listening. And I'd like you to join us next month on August 31st, where we'll hear about the upcoming DINFOS Social Media Forum with instructor Kwande Hall, and we'll also explore implementation, the fourth part of the RPI process. Well, that's it for our show. I'll see you all next month.